Welcome, everyone. We are back and live to talk with my dad today. I am just getting my last little piece to plug in so that we can have our discussion about education today. And we'll be talking about cost and how it is that we can rethink our education system. All right, my dad is on and we are ready to go. It's taking a second. Oh, here it comes. Hello. Hello? Can you hear me? No, you can't hear me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Oh,
Any
no, did you get new
any kind of
earphones?
trying my cordless ones.
Okay. Well, who knew those would be better?
Oh, well, I didn't, but I'm glad we're figuring this
Very
out.
good.
It must have been a grounding problem or something. I don't know.
Good
So
morning.
good
It's bright and
morning.
early here in Washington State. It's 7:30 a.m. So I had to.
And
We
where
are
are
in
you?
Ellensburg, Washington, so about 2 hours from Seattle. And exactly after I leave
Right.
here, after we finish up, I'm all packed up and ready to go. We'll be heading straight to Seattle. And tomorrow we take off to Alaska. So I'm very excited to go to
Wow.
Seattle, but I've
Were
been
you
there
able to get
before.
in?
So Alaska's new.
Did you make any contact with that person from Shelley from
LA.
Washington, Eastern Washington, or whatever? I forget the
The
university
email that
name
you
now.
had sent.
I sent you an email.
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
well, I
yeah.
mean, I followed up and said hello or thank you, but my understanding was she was waiting for people to get back to her. Yeah.
She was. I told her you might want to just touch base with her, maybe just a phone call or something, and just
Ah,
say thank
yes,
you.
yes. No, I think I followed up via email. That tends to be the quicker way
Yeah.
that we move through things. But all right, so we have a topic today. Would you like to introduce it?
Yes, I would.
I mean, you're representing all
Free
everyday Americans today,
college.
so I mean, ham it up, Dad.
All right. Well, what is, I guess the big question to me, to you, is what does free college mean? I mean, there's so many different things that people
Yeah.
say and do and everything. They talk, oh, free tuition, free this, free that. Well, what does that really mean? Because after, you know, I'm certainly not an authority on anything, but I know that private schools are heavily endowed.
Yep.
That's number one. Public institutions are supported by a lot of tax dollars, anything already. Um, and so my question starts to become, first off, was why is college so expensive in the first place? Um, I think, you know, to me, that's kind of the root cause of where we're going, and what we have to look at is why is college expense or cost escalated at such an unbelievable rate from, and I know I'm out of the 60s and 70s and I know our cost was low, but the fact is the facilities that are there, and I don't know, is it professors? I mean, you can maybe address this a lot better than me, but that to me is really the first question that has to be answered. And then we need to move on to, what is the definition of free college? Or, I mean, if you don't graduate and you didn't do what you were asked to do, why are we giving you money and saying here it's free? So anyhow, I'll let you uh, go on with that and give me some
Sure.
answers according to that.
So there, this is, as you have rightly pointed out, it is a what we'd call multifaceted problem, right? It has many, many, many layers, and
Yes,
politicians have tried to roll it up
absolutely.
into one punchline: free education for all. Exactly.
Again,
And it's interesting
again.
as I watched the debates. I saw this both in education and in healthcare. I watch and study this day in and day out, and I still could not tell you the difference between each and every person's nitty gritty plan because they essentially all sound the same, and yet all don't seem plausible, and every one of them relies on Congress to approve something, so they can't even promise them. So it's really interesting how this is degraded, and I often say to people, You may not be able to explain exactly why it's not working or why it doesn't make sense or why you don't believe it, but you can feel it, right? You know this this
Right.
isn't going to wash. So yeah, a couple of key points. Number one, the greatest amount of debt, and I'm not saying that nobody has debt that has gone to college, honestly, but the greatest amount of debt and percentage that is taking up that large number they like to show everybody are people who didn't finish and went to for-profit schools. So right off the bat, what you're actually talking about doing, if you were to do a full just a couple of the candidates say they're just going to refund everybody's money. What you're actually going to be doing is giving money to businesses who haven't graduated people. That that should anger
Right.
everyone, right? So you have to be selective. So that's right off the bat.
No.
The second piece is you're correct. There is a lot of money in the private schools. Certainly, I benefited. We did not come from money, and so I got a scholarship, and that scholarship, of course, comes from their endowment, and I didn't have to pay it back. And they essentially invested in me, believing that I would go out and do great work. The universities are continuing to do this. In fact, interestingly enough, when I mentor students, and I mentor a lot of students, first question I ask is, how much do your parents make? And if the parents are poor, I tell them to apply to every school. If the parents are rich, I tell them to apply to every school. If the parents make somewhere between 100 and 250,000 a year, that's the group that's hamstrung, right? They're the ones that have to be looking at the state schools because they can't afford the full tuition and they don't qualify for support. Then there's a third piece to it, right? There are scholarships. I have a kid on a music scholarship. You can tell me all day long the arts doesn't give money. It does. If you are of a certain caliber, they do give scholarships. My daughter's on a military scholarship. She's on ROTC. There are lots of money for that. We have money for cyber. She's looking at the NSA and other programs that exist. We do have scholarships. All of that said, though, that is assuming that you have a traditional college plan where for some reason you think every person in this country needs to go to college and they all need to go to a four-year institution. I don't think anybody believes that anymore. Certainly the colleges don't believe that. And certainly I think Americans, and I have found it all over the country, people are not believing that every kid needs to go to college or that they need to go to a four-year college. So now we get to the question of what do you actually need to do and what is the education system of the future going to look like? Number one, it's going to be lifelong learning. So you should expect to be in college or upskilling or boot camps, whatever you want to call them, even when you're 50 years old, possibly even when you're 65. The expectation is that we will work until 75. I know. And that you will have 3 to 6 careers, not jobs, not working in the same field, but
Right.
actually changing careers. And the reason is because the world is turning over so fast. So all of our young people should expect to have to retrain at multiple times in their lifetime. Are the politicians suggesting that we're going to we're going to pay for education at every tier? No. So it's an untenable goal, and it is based on old 1950s industrial age models. That's not the model of the future. So it's not going to work. The second thing is it's going to be real world focused. So we're not going to just educate people for the sake of education, at least not everyone. Certainly, and when we interviewed Dr. Munson, the president of RIT, he makes a great claim. There are people who need to come and be educated for thinking, for research. That's how we make sure that we continue to be at the cutting edge. And that is absolutely true. But that isn't 100% of society, right? This is in my former job. I talked with one of the provosts at University of Chicago, and he said they'll self-select. These are people who are interested in education for education's sake, and really prefer the word learning. So the whole idea of college is going to change to be focused on what you need to know, not just what we've had as a standard process in the past. And then the last thing is that this changes all of the models to be individualized. In other words, what you need to learn is different than what I need to learn, which is different than what someone else needs to learn. And we don't need everybody learning the same thing. I say it all the time, and it is in one of my recent posts. Stop standardizing Americans. Start optimizing talent. You want a country that works like a well-oiled machine, then encourage and support people to be their best selves and then connect everyone. That's how you make a country work at its best. By having everybody be the same, then you just create predictable outcomes of mediocrity, and nobody wants average. So I think if I may just
Yeah,
wrap this up, the one
keep
really
going.
strong point that we need to make is that what politicians are saying on stage right now is based on an old model. It is not going to be supportable long term. And what we need to do is actually progress into the future, which means we have to think outside the box.
Yeah, and well, we can go back to even our past
Right.
discussions and everything. I mean, again, it reverts back to
Yes.
culture change
Yes.
thinking. You know, that if we don't change the culture, and we've talked about this early, talking about
Right.
as youth, as you know, children coming into pre-K, whatever, so that they understand that they're going to not. I mean, you don't want to start talking about
What? You
65
don't think at
years
three
of
years old you need
education,
to
but
start talking about
what
that?
you well, probably not, but maybe by six. But
No overachievers expected.
but the fact is
15,
is
by the
that
way. It's
we
15 when
are
we start talking about it. It is
we
15, yeah.
15. Okay, we are pigeonholed, thinking by the time they're 6 years old about it's so regimented about what they have to do, where they're going, standardized to do this,
Yeah.
standardized to do this. You lose the interest, you lose the focus, you lose, they become um,
Yeah.
lethargic in their own lives. Okay, we're not enhancing their
Right.
personal lives. We're not enhancing, how they're doing. Just because it's we can sustain young people with programs of all the basic needs, from the food, clothing, and housing and that. But the fact is that's not really enhancing our nation at all, and it's not enhancing them. It's really not giving them the actual intellectual food they need to actually enhance themselves, which then automatically translates into enhancing everybody around them. It sounds like a simple process, but it's not as simple as we'd like it to be. Um, uh, I want to go back to the notion that we have free college and stuff. The thing is, what's really been unique through our history, okay, is that we made a decision a long time ago to have free education
Mm-hmm.
through K through 12. That's been on the books forever. Since the middle of the 18th century, or 19th century. Um, so I don't think that we're indicating that we're going to go past that, but it's that point where you have described that and I go back to the culture change. We have to change it in those K through 12 years, so that as they enter in um, and graduate, can show them how to graduate. Not so much that we're going to force you through that little eye hole in the
Right.
needle. We're going to show you how to graduate. We're going to show you why it's important. We're going to give you the paint a picture of the future so that you feel good about graduating where you're going. Um, and I think that if we don't do a good job of that, and I don't know that even in the public sector schools we're doing that. I think it's part of the private school curriculum is to show them how it's done. I think we're still losing that a little bit not a little bit, a lot in the
Yeah.
public sector. Unfortunately, we've had to focus on being parents in the schools, and that's difficult. It's really difficult at that point. So, I mean, those are subjects. And you want me to speak for my generation and people around? That's one of the things that they worry about is why are the schools continuing to have to be parents? Um, we're not educated. Their core values of life need to come from the internal side of the family rather than always at the school level. But we have to, if it's not going to happen, then we're going to have to do it there. We just have to do a better job at it. Going back to the free thing, um, one of the things that I did a little bit of looking up and looking at graduation rates even for some of the universities. I know that Florida, University of Florida has an 87% graduation rate, which is remarkable. That's really a great number. I think Florida State is like at 80%, somewhere in there. So they're all, those upper class or those type of universities are graduating folks at a great rate. I would like you said, at these for-profit schools, what their graduation rates are, and from what you're indicating, they're not very good, and which
Yeah.
creates debt. I mean, if you can't take that education and translate it into income, then you've created debt. And it doesn't matter why or how you did it, but maybe they need to do a better job at teaching folks how to graduate. Maybe that should be their stuff. But we're trying to fund it for them, and like you said, these guaranteed loans are out there. I mean, all we're doing is asking, that even if we cut it in half and said, all right, we'll pay half if you graduate, or we'll pay the whole thing if you graduate, but
All,
you'll have to pay half or
all
something.
you'll
I don't know. We're asking them to do it. I don't
No,
know how
all
we're
you'll
going
end
to get
up
around
with
that.
are schools then that graduate people, but they don't actually have the skills that they need. So when you put it
Yeah,
sounds
I
simple
know.
and it sounds great on paper or on a
I
stage,
know.
but when you get down to the nitty gritty, the requirements to approve and to make it fair aren't there. And I think you bring up another point, the decision making point, right? What makes someone choose to go to a school that costs $70,000 a year with no support? I have friends who have 250 to 300, 350, and they're not they're not surgeons. In fact, many of them ended up deciding to stay home with their children. I absolutely support that 100%. That said, why rack up that kind of a debt when a state school, I mean, many in our state of Florida, if you do well in high school, you get full tuition covered. So maybe you have to live at home, but you don't have to pay for anything. One of the other states, I can't remember which one, but I think it was New Mexico. They just passed a law that it'll all be free for state schools. Most of the schools, or most of the states, have programs. They expect you to perform to get the money, but why choose to go to a private school when you have a great education available to you? That I think is a question we need to ask. So when a lot of the politicians talk about free education, now yes, there are some that are extreme that just say free for all everything, but they're also offering free healthcare for all possibilities of maybe issues, free jobs guaranteed for everybody, no matter what your skill, capability, or willingness to work are. So, I mean, they're kind of in the stratosphere of free everything, right? But most of them fall into a free 2-year community college space. Um, that cost, though, even if you were to go to that, in no way, you would have to work so hard to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to pay for community college. I mean, our community college is like $200 a credit hour. So I'm sorry, like $200 a class. I mean, you would never get to that. So the people they're talking about helping, which I love the idea of helping with the community college space because it's a really direct learning to job scenario, and it's quantifiable. It's 2 years, and it doesn't cost taxpayers a whole lot of money. But just a blanket free for all, or even to suggest that you're going to cover everybody and it's community college, you're not covering people with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt in that case. So the whole thing is so jumbled, and I think people get that. This is the simple space. Number one, education is going to change. We are going to learn across a lifetime. Number two, it's going to be personalized. It's going to be what you need to learn, and it's going to start differentiating in high school, so around age 15. And number three, it's going to be real world or focused. So the learning programs in the universities are changing. But there's one last piece to this, Dad, that you asked, and I think it's really important that we emphasize it. You said, why in the world does it cost so much to go to college? What in the world are you paying for? The assumption is that you were just paying for the classes, but that's not true. When you asked, are you paying for universities? Are you paying for professors? You are. And what you're getting out of that is research for the future.
60% of the economic growth in this country across history is due to that innovation research. You do not want to let that go. If you let it go, and I was just talking to, in fact, it'll be one of our interviews in a couple of weeks, and we'll be touring a research lab highly funded by military and government programs. We need people to recognize if you cut that, you will not have a future, because you will create a situation where we are dependent upon China and other countries that are investing forward. So that's where these costs come in, and we don't want to lose that piece. What we might want to do is figure out a better way to fund it.
I think I think actually even funding it, I think getting that
Yes.
message out is important. I think people have to understand. I think if they don't understand
Yep.
what you just said, or if they haven't heard what you just said, they will never, ever understand why it's so important to keep the
Yes.
universities funded at a rate that they are. Now, I think business, there's a lot of people that understand that piece, but the general public, I don't think really does. And that's tough. That's real tough because industry is still so profit driven, which is what our society is. It's
Sure.
a capitalistic society. That we fail to communicate that piece of it, that the
Yes.
incubator is the
Yes.
college and university system for their ability to progress in their own field of business. So we need to keep that in the forefront, and I think if we get anything out of our discussion, I think that's actually one of the things that we really should be focusing on, and keep that going. Um,
We are, yeah, we are
just
out of time. So go ahead
go
and
ahead.
give us your final thoughts. We are.
Are we really?
And unfortunately,
Oh
I have
my
to stick to
goodness.
time today. So, but this is a great
Oh my
place to
goodness.
finish. So go ahead, give your closing thoughts.
Yeah. I'll just close out from the fact is that I just want to say nothing's free. Everything has a charge for it, and investing in your own future as a person. Again, we say it a lot. I think it's done in classrooms around the world and certainly around our country. And I was part of that, and ignored it halfway through all the time, and probably fell asleep about 1/3 of the time it was being presented to me. However, fortunately, you weren't one of those people that did that. I kind of had to take the hard knock road to capitalize on my abilities. So, but I think if we can work harder, and I see that in some of the schools, that people are working hard to get that done, and hopefully we can have a culture that understands that clearly. This is a beginning of immense proportion, and building that ready nation is important. Um, can we just draw a little bit on your strategy?
Yeah. So
Um,
right.
you want to
Well,
announce that? I think you need to announce that, number one, and there's some really
yeah, the
great
service
stuff in there
strategy
too.
just came out yesterday. It's a little delayed because I was doing a lot of traveling and town halls, and we're actually planning
Hmm.
forward for a full Eastern trip, going to DC and Boston and Florida. So I'll be doing some more. I'll do another big trip doing those town halls.
Okay.
And so, but the focus is to say that defense is not just the job of the military, it's a job of every American. And so, what
Hmm.
we decided to do, and this is really driven by the Americans that I spoke to all over the country who said, absolutely, we need a service strategy, recognizing perhaps we don't need to require, but if we can get everyone's skills at the table and we can build up our communities and we don't have to spend taxpayer dollars to do it, we win on all fronts. And to tie that to education, which we haven't come out with our education strategy yet, that'll be at the end of the month. But I do want to say, to this point
Right.
of free education, if you're listening to folks on stage, be wary of the fact that they are relying on a House and Senate vote to be able to divide up, ask for more money, and then divide it up. They're not being clear how they're going to do that. And most importantly, it's based on an old model. What I encourage everyone to do is to look at the publicly released book, Modernizing Learning. You can get it on the government publishing office for free, or you can get it for Amazon in print for $40. And this is a government publication, not a political publication. It is a government publication that outlines exactly the blueprint, the steps we need to take to make change for the future, education costs will come down because we will change the structure of how it is that we educate across the lifetime. And we will be, in my opinion, the way I would do it is to tie those scholarships both to income, recognizing that those children of parents who are poor do need that support outright. That already exists, and we would continue it. But additionally, we need to look at those jobs of the future that we need and fund the education of people to get those jobs. We have shortage for medical help. We have shortage in cybersecurity. We have an expectation of, you can go. This is I'm not making this up. This is factual information off Department of Labor. I worked with them in this area. We know the jobs that are coming, and they cover every level of education. That is what we need to be building toward, what it is that we actually need, instead of just doing blanket free-for-alls that have no real plan and no promise, no guarantee, and they really are just claims on stage. It's sad. It's sad as a former government worker to watch. And I think Americans get it. They just don't know what the alternative is. So look it up, because the alternative exists. And it's ready to go. So
It does.
So that is good news. I like to bring good news. So, Dad, thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and cut out. I've got another interview
Thank
in
you.
2
And
hours,
good.
so I've got to get on the road.
Okay. Who's it with?
I am meeting with my niece, and we are going to be discussing gender neutrality. I think a very appropriate discussion in Seattle. Some leaders in this space,
Okay.
and yeah. So I'm going to be. We call it a grantee, because I'm going to be a great aunt. So I got the good end of the deal. I'm the grantee. Chris will be a grumpy, is what we decided, because he'll be a great uncle.
Okay.
But they are going to be raising the baby gender neutral, and I am really interested in some of the decisions they're making, and it fits so well with the culture of this area that I think it's a place where we could all learn. I certainly have a lot of questions.
Is this going to
I
be
think we're going to
online?
do it not live, and I'll post it
gonna be
another
online?
day, probably while I'm in Alaska.
Okay.
I try to stagger. All right, Dad. Good to
All right.
talk with you. Thank you.
Take
And good luck
care.
with the
Enjoy.
fundraising. I know
Be
that's
safe.
starting to move. So
I will try. Yeah, I do need to talk to Rob, so I'm going to
great.
get some clarification
Great.
on
All
some
right.
stuff
We'll
with
talk
him
to you
too.
later. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.